Today on the show, we're going to be looking at Death, the Deluxe Edition. If you didn't know that this is possibly one of the best compilations of all time, then this show is for you. Before we get into this, I am going to say that this is another comic with a lot of hidden knowledge, so if you like to watch reality TV or movies that don't make you think, then this episode is not for you. As always, we need to talk about the creator of Death really quickly, Neil Gaiman. Now, Neil Gaiman has written a lot of stuff for Vertigo, and he was actually part of Vertigo's British invasion, which is where Karen Berger got a bunch of writers from the UK and had them work for Vertigo, and their work changed the face of comics forever. As for Neil Gaiman himself, he has done a lot in comics, but he's also done a lot outside of comics, including screenplays. He wrote the English script for Princess Mononoke, co-wrote the script for Beowulf, and wrote several episodes of Doctor Who, including The Doctor's Wife. Side note before you leave it in the comments down below, I'm never going to talk about Doctor Who in detail on the show. It has nothing to do with geek culture from my standpoint being someone who was brought up in the UK. Neil Gaiman has also written a number of novels that a few of you might know about, which include Coraline, which was adapted into a stop-motion movie, and American Gods. If you still don't understand how impressive Neil Gaiman is, here is a quote that Stephen King has said about Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is simply put a treasure to the house of story. We are lucky to have him in any medium. Stephen King is very impressed by Neil Gaiman, so if Neil Gaiman is good enough for Stephen King, he is good enough for you. Now, like I said in the first part of this Death series, Death is originally from a comic called The Sandman, but what I left out is that she also has two comics of her own, Death, the High Cost of Living, and Death, the Time of Your Life. Both of these comics are incredibly impressive. They both got tons of hidden knowledge jam-packed into them, but you do have to read them with an open mind, otherwise you'll just be sat there like, what? Now, before we get into detail about Death's comics, I do want to quickly talk about the Sandman series, just so you have an idea of where we're coming from in the tone of her comics. So Neil Gaiman would eventually pitch a Sandman series to Karen Berger about a 1970s Sandman that was illustrated by Jack Kirby. A few weeks passed and Karen Berger would go up to Neil and would be like, hey, you still up for that Sandman series? Because we'll give you the rights to do it if you want. And Neil was like, yes, I'm up to do the Sandman series, but what's the catch? And Karen was like, you need to create a new Sandman. Now, the Sandman series would be largely independent, but it would borrow aspects of the DC universe, such as Hell According to Alan Moore and Etrigan the Demon. By the time the series finished in 1996, it was outselling both Batman and Superman, and it is one of the only comics in history to have an equal male-to-female demographic. As for the genre of the series, it has this charm. One minute it can be horror on the level of Hellblazer, and the next minute it will be this intricate fantasy that takes you on adventures. So, with all of that out the way, onto the compilation itself, and it actually starts with an issue of the Sandman. So, the Sandman, who we will refer to as Morpheus from this moment onwards, is sat there moping to himself, feeding some pigeons, and Death comes along and tries to cheer him up. She would talk about Mary Poppins and use her quirky charm that she has, and she would eventually realize, yeah, this isn't working, so she would just outright ask him, okay, what the hell's the matter? Now, Morpheus was in captivity for a very long time, and he goes on about, oh, when I was able to escape, I found out my captors were all dead, so I went after their children, and that felt fine, I suppose, but now I've got nothing to do, and blah, 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 whine, whine, whine. Death is sat there listening like, and then after he's done talking, she turns around and is like, listen, you're the one that chose not to cry out for help. You know that any of the Endless, especially Death and Destiny, would have come after you and rescued you. But you chose not to cry for help, and now your little game of revenge is over, you have nothing to do, and you're too scared to find something new. And then she goes on to say, Didn't you think that we would be worried about you? Didn't you think that I would be worried about you? Are you just going to sit there moping to yourself, or are you going to come with me and find something to do? And the two of them leave. This is kind of profound because it really does say, if you're in trouble and you know that help is available, ask for help. Don't be an idiot. Also, you should always let your loved ones know that you're okay, even if it's just for the sake of letting them know that you're okay, because we as humans, when we're alone, that's when we're in danger. Not from anyone else, but from ourselves. So Death and Morpheus go about visiting people that are about to die, and Death does her job while the two of them are exploring, and Morpheus poses the question, okay, the concept of dreams was put into captivity, but what would have happened if Death was put into captivity? The comic then goes on to pose a question. Why as humans do we fear death when we know it's inevitable? Now, some believe that death is an ending, others believe that death is a new beginning, and some others believe that death is just a part of a larger cycle. But the one thing that we all have in common is that we don't want to die. Even when humans are in pain and they're beyond repair, they do not want to die. Even people that are suicidal don't want to die. If they could see a way out of their own death, they would take that way out. Personally, I just see it as, whether you believe death is part of a larger cycle or you believe it's the end, you're only who you are right now in this very moment. So make the most of who you are now, today. You should go out and find your passions and find what you want to live for and do your best to make your mark. And you know what Morpheus does after this comic? He goes out to find his passions and make his mark. Next, we see a girl called Rainey Blackwell, who some of you might know as Element Girl, in an utterly depressed state. Rainey is alone in the world. She's been abandoned and she's not able to look like a normal human. She can create herself a face, but eventually it solidifies and falls off. Rainey was basically given the powers of all the elements by the sun god Ra, but this means whenever she tries to commit suicide, her powers save her. And when I say all the elements, I mean the periodic table of elements, not fire, water, earth, and air. Eventually, Death would turn up at Rainey's apartment while she was just passing by, and she would say a quote that I absolutely love. People always hold on to old identities and faces long after they've served their purpose, but you've got to learn to throw things away eventually. And that is true of life. People go through different chapters in their lives. It's how we grow as humans. But if we don't let go of the previous chapter, it will be the end of us. Death would turn around to Rainey and would be like, look, I can't take your life before your time, but you can take your own life by looking to the sun and asking Ra to take away your powers. And she does this, and she dies with an expression of joy on her face. As Rainey dies, Death wishes her luck in the next life, which is really sweet. Next, we're on Death: A Winter's Tale, and it begins with Death on this tangent about how when the universe first started, everyone was happy to see death, both at birth and when they die. But as time went on, things changed, and no one wanted to die, and no one was happy to see death. Being hated so much made Death feel horrible, so one day she just stopped doing her job. No person died, no plants died, no animals died, and no bacteria died. In the space of a few hours, pain swept across the entire universe, and people were crying for Death's return, so she agreed to come back. Eventually, Death would take a girl's life, and the girl would look at her and say, "How would you like it?" So Death agreed that once every 100 years, she would live one day in the life of a mortal to understand the life that she takes. Now that last bit can be interpreted in a number of ways, but I personally take it as, you can't criticize something unless you know the work that went into it. When you criticize people's work, you are essentially destroying a part of that person. And so many people are so quick to criticize something without really knowing what that piece of work means. If you look at people that make their own art, video games, YouTube videos, they tend not to criticize other people's work because they know how bad it feels to have their own work criticized. Unless the person openly asks for constructive criticism, they tend not to say anything at all because doing otherwise is a slightly dickheady thing to do. Death obviously does not want to be a dickhead, which is why she lives in the life of a human once every 100 years. So now we're on to Death, the high cost of living. And the comic starts out with this group of kids returning a woman's pet dove to her, and the woman pays these kids a $5, but these kids are like, we bet that you've got more than just a $5, hand over your stuff. But then the old woman turns out to know voodoo, and she breaks this one kid's leg, and it is insane. The old woman takes back the $5, takes her pet dove, and begins walking away, and one of the kids is like, you're a witch, but the old woman is like, I'm not a witch, but you don't live to be 250 without learning a thing or two. Time skips forward 1 month and we see this kid typing on a computer and he is sick of life. He is depressed about not all that much really. Nonetheless, he is in a state of depression, and after having an argument with his mother, he goes to a rubbish tip and stands on the edge of a fridge, and the fridge collapses and lands on his legs, and he needs help to get out, and who should turn up but Death? Fortunately, his legs didn't break from having a fridge on them, but Death is able to move the fridge out of the way, and he is badly cut up and his jeans are torn. So Death is like, come back to my apartment and I'll fix up your jeans and bandage up all your cuts. So as the two of them are walking back to Death's apartment, Death is all like, so what were you doing in a rubbish tip? And the kid is all like, oh, I was just thinking about how I don't want to live in the same world as the shopping network and the wrestling federation. And Death is just like, cute. This is something that we see too much in our society. We're evolving as humans, and as such we're becoming more intelligent, and so are kids. But we never teach kids what to do with their skills, and as such they become depressed and angry at the world around them. When it comes down to it though, it's the adults' fault for not teaching these kids to take personal responsibility for their own skills. These kids need to find their passions and find how they're going to make their mark on this world, otherwise, put bluntly, they become a negative waste of space, and no one wants to deal with that. Next, it will be revealed that Death is actually alive as a girl called Dee Dee, and her family died a month prior. Social services are trying to take Dee Dee away, and she is receiving protection from all of those around her. So the kid, who's called Sexton, would go into Dee Dee's apartment, and here she would fix up his jeans, he would receive treatment for his wounds, and she would reveal to him that she is actually Death and technically only 3 hours old. Sexton wouldn't believe her, he would call her crazy and would storm out of her apartment. So Sexton is walking out of the apartment complex and he's going over his head about what he would have said to her and what he should have said to her, about how she can't be Death and how Death isn't a real person. And all of these things would have made a really good argument, but he would have been an asshole for saying any of them. When Sexton goes outside, the witch from the beginning is there, and she shatters a bottle and threatens Sexton with it, and is all like, you were with her, weren't you? I can smell her. Take me to her. And the two of them go back upstairs to Dee Dee's apartment. Death, or Dee Dee, opens the door, and the witch, whose name is revealed to be Mad Hetty, basically says, Death, I hid my heart years ago, and I want it back, and I want you to find it. Otherwise, the boy gets it. So Death agrees to go out and find the heart, but she also says there are things that she wants to do for herself. So through the comic, Death is clearly very excited about being alive. She's excited about tiny little things like the crunch of an apple followed by its taste, or the chemicals that are put inside of a hot dog to make it addictive. Death still has that childlike wonder that so many of us lose as we're growing up, but she has seen the worst of humanity, so how does she have it? Because she's seen the best of humanity. Things can get bad, they can get really bad, they can get so bad you want to take your own life. But Death knows there is always something to live for, even if it's as simple as the crunch of an apple. So Death and Sexton head into the city. Meanwhile, elsewhere, there is an old man talking to this guy called Theo, and he is all like, she's coming, Theo, bring her to me, but no specifics are given other than that. We cut back to Dee Dee and Sexton, and we see that Dee Dee is a really nice girl. She's really pleasant, and people like being in her company, and because of that, life is easier for her. Put bluntly, this is here to represent that life is easier when you have something to be happy about and you're not this walking cesspit of negativity. Skipping forward a bit, the two of them go into a club and watch the show of a singer called Foxglove. And then Theo turns up and asks Death to come with him for some fun, but then Sexton gets tagged along. Keeping in mind that Death, and I quote, knows everyone really well, she thinks that she's got nothing to be worried about. And generally she doesn't. So Theo takes the two of them into this old building, and the old man from earlier is in there, and then Theo rips off Death's ankh and punches her in the stomach. Then the old man is like, Theo, you've done well, now give me the ankh. And Theo is all like, no, I'm gonna sell this for money, it's clearly worth a lot. And then the old man turns around and punches Theo, and Theo starts bleeding violently. Then the old man takes the ankh for himself and leaves and locks Dee Dee and Sexton in the room, and the two of them have no way to escape. So Dee Dee is really concerned about Theo. He's losing a lot of blood and isn't breathing properly, but then Sexton went to the same school as Theo and is all like, well, he deserves what he gets. But then Dee Dee turns around and is like, this is a real person we're talking about here, not a video game. No real person deserves this. This is something that I actually agree with Neil Gaiman about. Young people these days don't understand the value of life. They're so quick to wish someone else dead. Someone dying before they've really had a chance to live is sad and it's unhelpful and it doesn't help with progress. So what's the point in it? What's the point in wishing it on someone? Everyone has a place in this world. Everyone has a meaning that they have to find for themselves, and you should never wish a person dead before they've had a chance to find that meaning. Sexton and Dee Dee make up, but then Sexton wants to know what exactly is going on, and Dee Dee basically says, well, he's probably going to kill you, he being the old man. Then the noise of a rattle goes off, which is a death rattle, which means that Theo is dead. Meanwhile, back at Dee Dee's house, Mad Hetty is still there and she is looking for tea. And we're not talking herbal tea, we are talking good old English tea. Back with Sexton, Death's memories are slowly fading and becoming murky, and her mortal form is dying. That's what's happening. Next, what happens is basically Mad Hetty turns up and she was able to locate the two of them by using tea leaves. This scene literally just serves to move the plot forward, but then Death and Sexton tell Mad Hetty, yep, we're gonna find your heart, don't worry about it, we're just gonna go out now and do it. So they go to breakfast, and who should turn up but the old man who stole Death's ankh. The old man is all like, how did you get out? I have your ankh, you can't get out, you have no power right now. But then the old man is shooed out of the restaurant by the owner. So Sexton is all like, shouldn't we go get your ankh off the old man? But Death is all like, no. And then Sexton is all like, isn't it the source of your power? And Death is all like, it is. It's a symbol, and symbols have power. Then she goes to a market stall and buys a new ankh for $10, and that is the only time she's needed to use money so far. This is important because it's never a physical symbol that has power. It's the belief that people put into a symbol that gives it power. I mean, just look down your local high street and you will see that everywhere. Sexton and Dee Dee go to Central Park and Dee Dee is all like, you know what, I really enjoyed today. And Sexton is all like, what, you enjoy being locked up by loonies? Dee Dee says, not that bit, but that's part of life. There is sad bits, there's happy bits, there's painful bits. There are bits that you will remember forever, and it's all part of living. And then she stands up on the fountain, sticks her arms out, and passes away. Her 24 hours on Earth are up. Skipping forward a bit, Sexton had been given a Russian doll by Death, and Sexton gives it to Mad Hetty, and Mad Hetty takes it apart, and on the inside is a heart-shaped locket. And this ends Death, the High Cost of Living. Death, the High Cost of Living is the type of comic that got me into writing comics. But I want to move superheroes in the direction that Death, the High Cost of Living is already in. I want to see Batman or Superman or Flash go on this crazy tiny adventure that is so profound that it changes them forever. Next, we're moving on to Death, the Time of Your Life, but we're not going to get into any details for this comic because I don't want to spoil it for you if you choose to get this compilation. What you need to take note of is that it's about Foxglove, the singer in the club from Death, the High Cost of Living, and Hazel, the woman that got Sexton and Dee Dee into the club. Foxglove and Hazel are girlfriends with one another, and it really explores their relationship and the value that they place on life. We basically explore Foxglove as she becomes an international superstar while battling depression and having to choose between her home life and stardom. Meanwhile, Hazel has to protect her child from death. The Time of Your Life doesn't have individual messages like The High Cost of Living, but it does have a very powerful overall message, which is just hold on. Nothing is worth killing yourself over. Keep repeating that line to yourself until it's really drilled into your mind. Nothing is worth killing yourself over. There are some people that were in my life that I wish heard that, but it's too late now. This is obviously another comic that means a lot to me on an emotional level, and I want all of you to go out and buy this comic. But if you can't afford it, I'm doing another giveaway, so you can enter that. Now for this giveaway, you do have to be at least 16 years old because of some of the themes and issues tackled in this compilation, and I really don't want your parents to be mad at me. To enter this giveaway, you have to like me on Facebook, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below telling me what you are going to do to find your self-worth and shake negativity from your life, because those two things go hand in hand. This giveaway ends on May the 20th, and I will be announcing the winners on my Facebook page. Okay guys, that is it for today. If you think I missed anything important about death, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more history, and also don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. My name is Faust, this has been Exploring Comics, and it is super effective.